Well, good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock. Welcome to this meeting of the Strategic Planning Committee, today, 15th of December 2021. This committee sits alongside the three area-based planning committees of Dorset Council. Also, a welcome to any members of the public who are joining this virtual meeting. For the benefit of the public, I'm Councillor Robin Cook, Chairman of the committee. For today's virtual informal meeting, when a decision is required, committee members will express a minded to decision in respect of recommendations set out in the officer reports, with decisions being taken under officer delegated authority in the light of minded to decisions expressed by members in this virtual meeting. I will now hold a roll call of members to ensure everybody's in the virtual room. So would you please respond when I call out your name? Vice Chairman, Councillor John Worth.
Good morning, Chairman. Good morning, everybody.
Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Dave Bolwell.
Morning, Chairman.
Councillor Alex Brenton.
Morning, Chairman.
Councillor Kelvin Clayton. Kelvin's not here. Councillor Jean Dunseith.
Present, Chairman.
Councillor Mike Dyer.
Present, Chairman, but as I was unable to do the site visit, I won't be voting on this application.
Okay, well, I'll cover that when we get to that item. Thank you,
Thank
Councillor
you.
Dyer. Councillor Sherry Jesperson.
Morning, Chair. Present.
Councillor Mary Penfold.
Good morning, Chairman. Present.
Councillor Belinda Rideout.
Good morning, Chairman. Present.
And Councillor David Took.
Morning, Chairman. Present.
Thank you and good morning all. And the officers with us today are Mike Garrity, who's the Head of Planning, Anna Lee, Service Manager for Development, Management and Enforcement, Phil Crowther, Legal Business Partner, Peter Walters, Senior Planning Officer, Chelsea Gollidge, who'll be reading our representations, Elaine Tibble, our Senior Democratic Services Officer, and producing the meeting behind the scenes, but working ever so hard, is Judy Saunders and Megan Rochester. So welcome to all of you as well. Moving on to the agenda.
Chairman, sorry, could I just add,
yes,
very quickly to say Anna Lee won't be joining us at this meeting today,
okay.
so I'm here. So I just thought I'd let you know that. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for that, Mike. Yeah. Okay. And I'm reading further down that you're going to be the decision-making officer as well. For the
That's correct. Yes.
Yeah. That's fine. Thank you for clarifying that. Moving on to the agenda proper, Elaine, item 1, apologies, please.
We just have the one apology today from Councillor Kelvin Clayton.
Okay, thank you very much. Item 2, declarations of interest. Do members have any declaration they want to declare now? Want to make that now? If not, if anything arises during the debate, perhaps you would make it known. We can pass it on to the monitoring officer. Item 3, public participation. The committee has received written representations. They've been submitted in accordance with the amended speaking protocol for planning committee meetings that's included with this agenda. These will be read out by an officer not involved in the application and taken in the following order: objectors, supporters, parish and town councils, applicants and agents, and together with ward councillors who can choose to speak first or last. Now, if we go on to the substantive items, background information relating to the application before us today has been available to members prior to the meeting, covering consultation, objections and representations, together with the council's related policies. And how I propose to follow through on this item, I will invite the case officer to introduce the item. We will then hear the written submissions, and these will be read out by the officer who's not dealt with the applications. Following the public participation section of every item, I will ask officers if there are any salient points they wish to clarify. I will then ask members if they have any questions of clarification to ensure that everyone has had the opportunity to comment. Could I request that members of the committee direct any remarks and questions through the chair, and I will invite members to speak in turn. And please keep microphones on mute and the camera off when not speaking to maintain audio and video quality. At the end of the debate for transparency, I will take the minded to vote by roll call. and then the delegated officer will make the formal decision. So we move then on to item 4, which is application number 6/2020/0595. It's land north of North Fossil Farm, Dorchester Road, East Knighton, Dorchester, DT2 8DB. Now, this particular site was subject to a site visit by members on Monday this week. And I'm pleased to say out of 12 members of the committee, 10 of us were able to attend. Kelvin Clayton didn't, for obvious reasons, because he'd already given his apologies for this meeting. So there's no reason for him to have attended the site visit. And Councillor Mike Dyer was unable to make the visit anyway. So if I can go to Councillor Mike Dyer for a moment. Mike, can I just say to you, you didn't attend the site visit, as you've already mentioned. If you feel able to take part of the discussion and make a minded to decision, if you can explain why and how you're able to do that. Otherwise, you wouldn't be able to take part in the debate. Could I hear your response, please, to that?
Yeah, I understand that, Chairman. And as I said previously, I won't be voting on this application because I don't know the site well enough. Okay.
Well, you're obviously welcome to stay on the committee and listen to the proceedings as feel free. Otherwise, if you want to leave the meeting, feel free to do that also. Okay.
No, I'll stay put. It's an interesting application.
Okay. Yeah, good. Thank you. So just for clarification again, the members that attended, myself, obviously, Councillor John Worth, Councillor Shane Bartlett, Councillor Dave Bolwell, Councillor Alex Brenton, Councillor Jean Dunseith, Councillor Sherry Jesperson, Councillor Mary Penfold, Councillor Belinda Rideout, Councillor David Took. We were accompanied by 2 officers, Peter Walters, the presenting officer, and Mike Garrity, head of planning. So I think I've covered all that. So now it's over to Peter Walters. Peter, when you're ready, over to you, and you probably want to get your presentation up on the screen. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll just share my screen for you. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. Right, that's better. Sorry about that. Hopefully everyone can see this. Would you be able to confirm that you can? Fantastic. Okay, so thank you, Chair. So today, the application being brought before you is an application on land north of North Fossil Farm, Dorchester Road, East Knighton, and the application is for the installation of a 40 megawatt ground mounted photovoltaic solar development, including a substation and new fencing with associated landscape mitigation and ecological and ecosystem service enhancements. Before I get into the main presentation, if I could just update members, there is a slight update that I need to make to the officer report. Just in the wording is slightly the wrong way around, so apologies, but paragraphs 13.0, in fact that's a table, and then paragraph 15.8, where there's reference to contribution towards the AONB mitigation for an enhancement fund. Just to clarify, that is to be collected over 40 years instead of 20 years as written in the report. This was fully agreed by the AONB team. I apologise, it's a typing error in the report, but just for clarity for the committee. So by means of context, members have visited the sites to have a good idea, but just for members of the public, anyone watching, the site is situated approximately midway between Dorchester and Wareham, just to the north of the A352 road, which provides access to the site. It is slightly to the northwest of Winfrith Newborough and just to the east of just to the west of East Knighton. and so providing a little bit more clarity for members. This, as you'll see, this shows a ordnance survey map of the local area. So a few things to point out. I shall turn the pointer on so that everyone can see what I'm pointing at. So we noted on the site visit the former nuclear power station at Winfrith is situated here, which is in the process of being decommissioned. We visited this point at Drove Hill and also Five Marys down here. The land is in agricultural use at present, and the topography of the site is largely flat. Just to show you a location plan, the red outline denotes the area that forms the site itself. The blue area is land that's in control of the applicant, but doesn't form part of the application site itself. So you can see the access point coming from the A352, which is down here, up to the main solar farm, which is up here. So to run you through a few photographs from the site itself, on the site visit, we were obviously focused on the viewpoints looking onto the site. So these are photographs largely taken from within the site that I'll just run you through. So here we're looking at the southern edge of the site. You've got the A352 in the middle horizon. You might just see there's a vehicle in the background there. And beyond that is the hill ridge, which goes into the Dorset AOMB. I can't quite see the point from here where we stood, but we're looking in that general direction. From here, we're looking northeast towards Winfrith Heath. You can't see the building here, but the former power station, which we noted on the site visit, is actually behind this tree line here. You might just about make out the pylons in the distance there. And this is looking across the site. As I mentioned in my introduction, the topography of the site is extremely flat. There's very little in the way of inclines on the site at all. This is the proposed site for the substation. So the proposed substation will be in the southeastern corner of the site, near the access point, and this is what it looks like when you're down on the ground. Again, we saw this from wider views looking on our site visit, but this is what it looks like down on the ground. It's worth noting that there's quite significant screening already in place, so there are limited views that are screening. We're looking from west to east here, so effectively you're looking towards East Knighton and that way. But you can see there's already well-established screening. The main solar arrays go off to the left of this photograph. So this is looking south from the site where the substation would be located back towards the AOMB, and we discussed I explained on the site visit, and for the benefit of members of the public, there is a part of the proposal is a line of trees to be planted that would be 30 metres deep, and that would be from here. So it would be beyond this hedge boundary. So from the AOMB, you would have very limited views of the substation itself. So this is the access point. It's an existing bridleway. The bridleway, as part of the proposal, will be upgraded to allow traffic, and it's worth making clear that the traffic would be primarily focused on the construction phase. Once the solar farm is in operation, there would only be maintenance vehicles, so there wouldn't be very many vehicular movements once the construction phase is completed. It should be noted that the bridleway will remain open. The construction management plan will ensure the safe use of the bridleway. So members of the public and users of the bridleway will be able to continue to do so during the construction process, and it will remain open once the solar farm is in operation as well. And so in this photograph, we're looking towards the northern edge of the site. For context, Drove Hill, where the barrow is, which we visited, is over to the right here. So we're looking along the eastern boundary of the site, which then curves up that way. Notice there are a few well-established trees on the site. These will be retained as part of the proposal. No trees to be removed. A full arboricultural method statement will be provided to ensure that the root protection area of all the trees on site are are maintained and protected during the construction process, and indeed when the solar farm is in operation. Another photograph taken from a similar point, but looking back across an expanse of the site, not all the site by any stretch, and we're looking now towards 5 Mary's barrows, which I believe are up here. It's quite hard to make out in the photograph, but again, you can see how flat the site actually is, which is one of the qualities of the site that makes it well suited to this kind of development. So here we're looking across the northern edge of the site. You can see in the plan along here there is an existing copse which will be maintained. That is over here. That is within the applicant's control, but will be retained, so that provides some screening to that end of the site. So any residential properties up here, which there are a few, will not be able to see this at all. As you can see, again, the topography remains very, very flat. Now we're looking directly towards Drove Hill. So Drove Hill is where we stood on Monday. One of the 2 barrows that are on the Heritage at Risk Register situated on the top of Drove Hill. You can just about make out a slight prominence on the top of Drove Hill, and the other one, as we saw, is situated, well, from this view it would be behind that. So you can see the proximity of Drove Hill to the site itself. From here we're looking north to south. This is across the majority of the site. You can see again we're looking back towards the A and B. You can see the expanse of the site as well. So just looking from here, we're looking into that northern corner where the tree line is. As you can see, that forms a corner to the site. And as I've mentioned, it's worth recognising that screening will be retained. It should be noted, and I'll get into this in a bit more detail, there are some existing watercourses on the site. The proposal is to retain those watercourses, and the applicant has worked with the lead local flood authority to ensure that surface water flows for drainage are retained. So the development should not cause any additional issues in terms of surface water flow on the site. The lead local flood authority are happy with this approach. Coming down towards the bottom end of the site now, so we're looking from a point which would partly be in the tree screening, actually, looking towards North Fossil Farmhouse itself, which is, you can just about make it out behind their established hedge, which is the boundary of their rear garden effectively. And then there's some associated agricultural buildings with North Fossil Farmhouse. Also some neighbouring properties over in the distance, which you may be able to make out on the photograph, but they're over here. And we also noted on the site visit there are neighbouring properties on Gatemore Road. It's worth mentioning at this point that none of the neighbouring properties directly abut the site. There is at least a field between each of the neighbouring properties and the site itself, so no one's back garden will abut onto this development. So this is a photo that will hopefully be familiar. This is taken from 5 Mary's Barrows, so this is slightly further to the east than we walked. This is actually adjacent to the Barrows instead of over by the parking area, but you can see looking across, the site itself stretches along this expanse up here. And I've got a zoomed in photo here just to assist with that. This is the former nuclear power station. It's in the process of being decommissioned. The current expectation is that it will be decommissioned by 2024, and then that building will go. So in the longer term context, that will not be present. Dorset Innovation Park is further over in the photograph over here. But in terms of the immediate context, in the future, you will not see that in accumulation with the solar farm if members are minded to approve it. as you can see, this is neighbouring properties again, well set away from the site. We noted on the site visit that there is an existing solar farm, which was useful for context as to what the solar arrays would look like in the context of viewing from here, albeit on a larger scale. And that solar farm is here. It's very difficult to make out. The application site is here, so actually you can see, because of the existing hedgerows and tree lines and what have you, it will be visible, but the visibility will be restricted to a degree, and there is landscaping proposed and mitigation, which I will come on to in a moment as well. So this is a photograph taken from the barrow that we visited, Drove Hill, looking back across the site. So just as a reminder, this field here does not form part of the site. We're looking beyond that. So this field here, this one here, this going up here as well. It does carry on round in addition to this, but this is one of the main viewpoints. And we're looking back towards, I took this on a murky day, but the Purbeck ridge line is over in the distance over here. And this is taken looking towards Drove Hill, another point of view, so that you can see this isn't taken from the site. This is actually taken from adjacent to another of the barrows in the area. The area does form part of a funerary landscape, which I'll get into in a bit more detail in a bit. So there are a number of barrows in the area, and we'll discuss this a bit more later in the presentation. So just to give you an idea of the proposed site layout plan, the blue areas indicate the potential for surface water flooding, and so they have been taken out of the solar arrays. The number of solar arrays has been reduced to accommodate this. So this is important because it doesn't exacerbate any existing flooding matters on the site, and Leeds Local Flood Authority are happy with that. It should be noted that it is in Environment Agency flood risk zones 1 and 2, and it's not considered to be at particular risk from surface water flooding, but nonetheless, in order to take a belt and braces approach, any opportunity where there could be surface water pooling has been removed from the arrays. It should also be noted where you can't see the potential pooling areas, these are where there are either existing hedgerows and trees, or the intention is to reinstate former hedgerows as well. So there are a number of points on the site where you can see where there was historically a hedgerow which has been removed, and the intention is to reintroduce that, which provides a gain in biodiversity terms. A detailed landscaping plan will be the subject of a planning condition if members are minded to approve this application, to ensure that we have a suitable landscaping scheme. But the landscape architect is happy with what's being proposed, and it's just fine tuning the principle of what's being proposed is acceptable to the landscape architect. So taking you on to the development itself, these are the elevations of the solar arrays. In terms of the scale of them, the maximum height from the ground is 3.5 meters, so you can see that there. They're angled at 20 degrees from the ground, and there is a distance between the arrays of 4.5 meters, so they're not bunched together, and that's partly from the point of view of making sure that they perform as well as they can, but also helps in terms of the visual impact. I mentioned the substation. The substation, this is the front elevation of the substation. It has a number of bits of equipment which I won't claim to understand exactly what all of the elements do, but they're all necessary for the generation of electricity and moving that onto the electricity grid, and it's fairly typical of what you'll see around and about various substations. In terms of dimensions, the maximum height of any of this equipment is 6.5 meters. The compound is 40 meters by 20 meters, but not all of that compound is is built up. So the switchgear room is the only building on the site, and that has a maximum height of 5 metres. It's 12.6 metres in length and 6.5 metres in width. It will be enclosed by the palisade fence, which you can see here, which is 2.4 metres in height. And this will be fairly well screened, particularly from views from the south, from the AONB, because of the proposed tree planting that will take place, as well as other landscaping on site. The reason for the size of this substation is all to do with electricity connections. So you can only connect to the grid at certain points, and in this instance, the only option is 132 kilovolts, which is the highest connection point. So in order to generate electricity, they have to provide a substation that can convert the energy onto that grid, onto the grid at this point. So they're limited in the scale. So although it is a larger substation, that is required. There's a few more elevations, the rear, and then elevations from the north and the south, just to give you an idea. And I think it's worth pointing out that actually, when you're looking from the north and the south, actually, in terms of what you can see, it's actually fairly limited insofar as there's quite a large open area which will be obscured by the palisade fencing. So it's not as visually imposing as it might appear. Most of the equipment is actually contained within that part, which goes along here. And here's a floor plan which really demonstrates that actually you've got the access coming in here and access points, and then the various bits of equipment that are needed. These cables would be underground, so you would not see them. It's worth noting that from here the cables would go underground into the access road, down the access track, which is the bridleway, and join the public highway. From the public highway they'll connect through to Winfrith. That doesn't form part of this application. Permitted development rights exist to allow that connection to be made. It would need to be made, I believe, by Scottish and Southern Electricity as the grid provider. So that does not form part of this application, but just to reassure members that there won't be any cables crossing protected designated land or anyone's garden or anything like that. It makes use of the public highway, and there's provision within planning regulations to do that without the need to bring it before the committee this morning. So as part of the development, there need to be transformers. So the substation, there's one substation, which is where the electricity that has been generated is then converted into a form ready to go onto the grid. But there are transformers at various points around the site, which I will show you in a minute in a plan. In terms of dimensions, the transformers would be 6.5 meters in length, 3 meters in height and 2.5 meters in width. So these are much smaller buildings dotted around the site, and will not be particularly prominent in the landscape. And on this diagram, I can show you where they will be. Apologies, I think the image is blurred slightly, but nonetheless, it should be clear enough as to where everything is to be situated. So the green is where the substation is in the southeastern corner of the site, going down to the access road. And then there are various transformers dotted around at different points on the solar arrays. There will be security fencing provided as part of the application. The security fencing will have a maximum height of 2.4 meters. There will also be CCTV poles. The CCTV poles will be up to 4 meters in height. The security fencing will be set back from the existing hedgerow at least 5 meters. And the reason for that is, and the reason for that is to be able to provide wildlife corridors. So wildlife crossing the site won't be restricted by the security fencing from getting from one end of the site to the other. This is an overview of the landscaping that's being proposed. As I mentioned, a more detailed landscaping plan is the subject of a planning condition, but you can see this is where the southern tree screening is proposed, which will go some way to screening certainly the southern end of the site. It will not screen the whole of the site from the wider views that we saw, but it will help from the southern end. Particularly the substation will be well screened by that. And you can see along here as well, this is indicative at this point, but you can see the proposed planting of the hedgerows as well, which don't currently exist, as well as providing further screening within the site. So that's further tree planting to further reduce the visual impact that you'll see, and also along here. So that's quite significant because Drove Hill Barrows, the one that we stood at, is over here. And there'll be a good amount of screening provided along that eastern boundary to reduce the visual impact of the site from the barrows. So the site does not sit within the Dorset AONB, but it is in close proximity to it. So everything that you see in red is the AONB. Our site goes up here. This is the top eastern corner. Apologies, I couldn't get an outline on there. I was having technical difficulties, but this is the access point up here, and the site comes roughly along here. So the site sits outside of the AONB. However, the scale of the development is considered to have an impact on the setting of the AONB. Paragraph 176 of the National Planning Policy Framework requires us to consider the impact on the setting of the AONB, not just development within it. And the NPPF also requires us to give great weight to conserving AONBs. So significant discussions have taken place around this. The AONB management team had initially suggested that an appropriate solution would be to reduce the scale of the development, and the applicant has submitted a viability assessment to explain why that's not possible. And going back to the discussion about the substation, that substation cannot be reduced in scale because of the connection point that's available, and so that is a fixed scale and at a fixed price. And so if you reduce the size of the solar farm but still have to provide the same scale substation, that inevitably has an impact on the viability of the scheme. It is worth noting that where possible, the scale and number of arrays have been reduced, and that was in response to lead local flood authority. So we have seen some reduction, but nonetheless, it wasn't sufficient for the AONB team's concerns about the scale to be overcome. However, there are, as we've discussed, there's a good amount of landscaping proposed, including the tree line to the south of the site. And the AONB management team have discussed with me whether, given that the scale can't be reduced, whether there's opportunities for other mitigation. So that part of that is the landscaping that's shown, but also a landscape enhancement fund which would be provided, and that would be used for schemes both on site and in the local area within no more than 10 kilometres to provide landscape enhancements. And the AONB management team have concluded that on the basis of achieving renewable energy on the site, as well as those landscape enhancements and enhancement fund, that although they maintain there is harm to the setting of the AONB, the benefits of the renewable energy plus the mitigation being proposed outweighs the harm. So therefore they do not object, but I do need to make it clear that it is accepted that there is a degree of harm caused to the setting of the AONB here. I should have mentioned, sorry, in the last slide, I'll go back one if I may. Archaeological surveys will be carried out as part of the proposal for the northern end of the site. There is the possibility that there may be peat deposits with potential archaeological importance in them. So the senior archaeologist is happy with a planning condition that would require surveys to be carried out, and if deposits are found on the site, we would need to look at the type of foundation that's used. That doesn't change the scope of this application, so we're comfortable that we can do that as a planning condition and not need to come back in to revise the scheme, because the scheme itself would not change. Okay. I mentioned earlier that the landscape is a funerary landscape. when we visited Drove Hill, we saw the two scheduled ancient monuments that are on the Heritage at Risk register. They're here. We stood here next to this one. As I mentioned on site, but for clarity, there are a number of other scheduled ancient monuments within the area. So going up onto Winfrey further, that is Blacknell Hill. There are a couple there. There's one over the other side, and then coming back to the south, 5 Marys, which again we stood there. There's a series of 5 barrows there, plus some other ones in the vicinity. There are also listed buildings in the area, Grade 2 listed buildings. So Design and Conservation Officer and Historic England have advised that there is less than substantial harm to the setting of the scheduled ancient monuments and the setting particularly of the funerary landscape. The discussions have taken place and it's been proposed to provide mitigation in the form of doing works, a schedule of works to remove these barrows from the Heritage at Risk register. As we saw, the one that we visited was in a fairly poor condition, mostly down to animals burrowing and what have you. And a schedule of works would be agreed between Historic England, the Conservation Officer, and the landowners in order to bring them off the Heritage at Risk register. In addition to that, we've travelled along public access land, which is managed by the Dorset Wildlife Trust, and the intention would be to provide interpretation boards as well, so that we can better understand, or members of the public can better understand the landscape in which you find yourself, because I think when you stand up there, you perhaps don't realise the historic context of the area. So those public benefits do carry significant weight. Scheduled ancient monuments carry the highest form of protection, and so the opportunity to remove two from a Heritage at Risk register is considered to be a significant public benefit, along with providing interpretation for members of the public to better understand the locality and the context of the area. So on that basis, the Design and Conservation Officer and Historic England conclude that, again, less than substantial harm is caused by the proposal, but taking account of the guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework, in this instance, it's considered that there are significant public benefits, which in this instance are the long-term preservation of those two Heritage at Risk scheduled ancient monuments, as well as the interpretation, and those public benefits are considered to outweigh the harm that's being caused, and therefore on that basis they have no objection. And both the AONB Enhancement Fund and the sum to bring them 2 barrows off the Heritage at Risk register would form part of a Section 106 legal agreement, which the applicant is happy to sign up to and is in draft form at present. So just to summarise, really, the principle of development is considered to be acceptable. Policy CO of the public local plan, which is countryside, requires the countryside location to be essential, and consideration of cumulative visual impacts as well as any impact on highways and what have you to be taken into account. All of those matters have been addressed. Policy REN of renewable energy, again, has been fully addressed at all points, and this is I go into much more detail in the report about this. So therefore the principle of development is considered to be acceptable. The impact on the AONB, as we've discussed, less than substantial harm would be caused to the setting of the AONB. However, the public benefits secured by the Section 106 agreement and the landscaping are considered to outweigh the harm as alongside the provision of renewable energy. In terms of localised area, the landscape architect has no objections and actually considers that, subject to a good landscaping scheme, her words, well, it could be an exemplar scheme. So there are no objections in local views to the proposal. In terms of the impact on heritage assets, as we've discussed, again, less than substantial harm that is caused is outweighed by the public benefit of removing those scheduled ancient monuments from the Heritage at Risk register. As I mentioned, we discussed archaeology acceptable subject to that condition for the surveys. Impact on residential amenity. The nearest properties are well screened, as we discussed, and there is at least a field between each of the residential properties, so there's considered to be no harmful impact on them. And it's worth noting again that a construction management plan forms part of a planning condition to ensure that during the construction process the consideration is given to neighbouring residents. The site isn't within any designated sites, but is near SSI land. Natural England have no objection that the use that's being proposed will not increase pressure on the heathlands, so they have no concerns, and an appropriate assessment has been undertaken. The highways team are happy with the proposed access, subject to conditions, and that's primarily around the ensuring that the first 50 metres of the access road is not made of loose material that could go onto the public highway and cause a highway safety risk. The visibility displays are considered to be suitable. And as I mentioned in the main presentation, it's worth noting that after the construction process is completed, there will only be sporadic visits to the site effectively for maintenance or security issues. So there will not be a high number of traffic movements once the work to the site is completed. As I discussed in the main presentation, the scheme has been revised to avoid surface water flows. And so there's no objection from the lead local flood authority. The minerals and waste team were consulted. The land has the potential for minerals extraction in the future. However, this planning permission would grant permission for a period of 40 years, and then after which the land must be restored and the site decommissioned. And on that basis, the minerals and waste team are satisfied that they're not permanently losing the potential to extract minerals from this site. In terms of protected trees, I don't think there are any protected trees on the site, but the trees that are on the site will be protected as part of the proposal. A full arboricultural method statement will be provided. That's a planning condition, but there's no concern that that can't be achieved successfully. And on that basis, officers consider that all significant planning matters have been appropriately or adequately addressed, and therefore recommend that the committee would be minded to grant the application subject to the conditions set out in the report and the completion of a legal agreement under Section 106 of the Town and Country Planning Act 1990 in a form to be agreed by the Legal Services Manager, and that's to secure financial mitigation for 2 barriers on the Heritage at Risk Register and for the AONB. And therefore we recommend that the Service Manager for Development, Management and Enforcement determines the application accordingly. This is an or situation with the recommendation. If the Section 106 agreement is not signed within 6 months, i.e. by the 15th of June 2022, then the application would be refused unless an extended time is agreed by the Head of Planning. And there's a list of proposed conditions informative, so the time limit in approved plans is standard conditions, temporary planning permission for 40 years, and details of decommissioning the site and landscaping at the decommission point must be provided at the time that the use ceases, or if the use ceases prior to this time. A condition requiring the implementation of a biodiversity mitigation plan. The scheme has the potential to provide net gain for biodiversity. Construction management plan, details of materials as we've discussed, implementation of the woodland to the south, hard and soft landscaping to be submitted, and landscape management plan to be submitted, a full arboricultural method statement, and details of the maintenance and management of the surface water and the archaeological investigation. And any pre-commencement conditions have been agreed with the applicant prior to this committee meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. Very informative, and thank you for the detailed presentation. Right, we move on to the representations, and there are 3, and they're going to be read this morning by Chelsea Gollidge. Hello, Chelsea.
Hello, Chairman. Thank you.
I'll leave it to you when you're ready to make a start. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. The first comment we've received is from Sandra Ellis. I'm writing to you of my support for the above application for the following reasons, and I would like it noted that I have no affiliation whatsoever to the application or any person making it. I am a former chairman of the Winfrith Parish Council, and for the past 15 years I've been the chairman of the Winfrith Site Stakeholder Group for Nuclear Decommissioning Authority. During that time I have fought very hard to bring the Winfrith site back to Heathland. all on record, which is now happening. Informed by my experience with the decommissioning work, I think this proposal is a very good one. Solar farms have very little impact on the land where they are installed and on the community that they neighbour. We already have one or two around here, and provided they are well screened, no one takes any notice of them. I also consider that the extensive ecological enhancements that are being proposed will be a great complement to the Heathland reinstatement at the Wimfrith Atomic Energy Site, and together they will provide a fantastic boost to the habitat of our local wildlife. The application, if approved, would be a continuing asset to the production of electricity without the need for fossil fuels, which at the time of writing is slowly being reduced around the world to try and limit the rise of global temperatures and the impacts in climate change, which is currently being discussed by world leaders at COP26. The need for electricity is going to rise exponentially in the coming years, and with nuclear power options limited and fossil fuels very much in decline, any land that is a potential viable site for solar power should be considered. I understand that there is support locally for this project, and I understand there is some objection too. I'd just like to add that over 50 years ago, the objections to an experimental nuclear power station being built on Wimfrith Heath, known as Thomas Hardy's Egdon Heath, was so great there was a long debate in Parliament. I still have the Hansard report. The build went ahead, and as we all know, the site, as well as experimenting with 9 different types of reactors, produced electricity for the national grid. Our need for power remains and it grows. We must replace our old power stations, and we have a duty to our children to build sources of power that safeguard the environment for future generations. Solar farms are a good and safe way to do it. The next comment is from Eric Seeley from MD Fossil Farms. We started farming North Fossil at Wimfrith 37 years ago. During that time and to date, it's grown a mix of grass, cereals and maize. Farming has evolved significantly in that time. Diversification has always been important, and we are proud of the farming business we have nurtured, providing locally grown and reared produce for our community, which also provides jobs to members of our local community. With major changes to farming policy, it is becoming more important than ever before to diversify our business to help ensure we can keep farming and providing food. We recognise that the economic sustainability of the farm goes hand in hand with the environmental sustainability of the farm. In recent weeks, the matters of global environmental pressure have been at the top of every agenda. It is clear to see that this will bring more challenges to farming, and as a farming family, we can see that a central pillar of our business, raising beef cattle, could be called into question if it is not done in an environmentally less intensive manner. We have considered the options presented by renewable energy for many years, and we believe that using some of our land for a solar farm is an essential piece of the puzzle as we transition to a sustainable farming future. The land that is being proposed for the solar farm is the poorest areas of land we farm and the least naturally productive. By changing the way we use this land, it will help to reduce our overall farm carbon footprint. This land will benefit from being rested, and if the solar farm is approved, it will become an area of permanent pasture which will allow the soil to restore. Yet it will still be agriculturally productive, as sheep can graze amongst the panels and in the margins, but without any artificial fertilisers being applied. As the stewardship of our farm passes to the next generation, our farming activities must evolve once again. Generating clean renewable energy will safeguard the economic and environmental sustainability of our farm, helping to ensure we can continue to provide locally produced food sustainably for generations to come. The next statement is from the applicant, Hugo House of Spring CHE Limited. Good morning, Chairman and members of the committee. Your officers have recommended that permission is granted for our solar farm proposal at North Fossil Farm. Following extensive pre-application discussion and consultation, our clean energy project has received significant community support and has no outstanding objections from statutory consultees. I would like to highlight some of the important factors and benefits of our proposal. Our vision for North Fossil Farm is to create a pioneering project that delivers new renewable energy, significant ecological benefits, and allows for the continuation of agriculture, providing a model of how farming, clean energy and wildlife can thrive side by side. If approved, the proposal can deliver enough locally generated clean electricity to supply more than 14,000 homes with over 9,000 tonnes of carbon emissions saved every year. We wholeheartedly agree with the consultation response of Dorset's landscape officer, which states, the landscape where this particular installation is proposed is perhaps amongst the most appropriate that there is in Purbeck area for this type of development, and could actually represent an exemplar scheme. Wimfrith receives some of the highest levels of sunshine in the UK. This maximises the site's potential to produce clean energy. As the neighbouring Wimford nuclear facility is decommissioned, this presents a rare opportunity to plug in new generation and make an economically viable connection to the electricity grid. Solar panels will be installed on around 30% of the total site area, but less than 5% of the land is actually disturbed. This leaves space to boost biodiversity by sowing wildflowers and grasses, restoring existing hedgerows and planting new native woodland, providing a haven for Dorset's unique wildlife. The project will achieve a significant 194% net gain in biodiversity. The land will be grazed by sheep and rested from intensive agricultural use. This will reduce chemical inputs, restore soil condition and replenish soil carbon. The project is fully reversible, and after 40 years the land will be revitalised, ready for harvest and benefit from an improved and resilient ecosystem. The consensus at the recent COP26 conference was irrefutable. To avoid catastrophic climate change, we have to keep the global warming below 2 degrees Celsius, and we must act now. Dorset Council has declared a climate and ecological emergency and announced their goal to become carbon neutral by 2040. Projects such as North Fossil Farm Solar are critical to achieving net zero for Dorset and the UK and avoid the worst effects of climate change. We have worked diligently with officers to ensure our proposal is robust and delivers meaningful environmental benefits. We therefore respectfully request that the permission is granted in accordance with the officer recommendation. That's all the comments. Thank you, Chairman.
Fine, thank you very much, Chelsea. Well, there are three representations all in support, so I don't know whether the officer wants to respond to those or just pass on to members' questions.
Thanks, Chair. I don't think I've got anything to add at this point.
Okay, thank you, Peter. Right, okay, now I'm going to move over. First of all, members, any questions of clarity? I've got two on here already. I've got Sherry first. Sherry.
Thank you, Chairman. I have 3 questions, if I may. 2 are very straightforward. The first question then concerns the bridleway. I realise I'm not absolutely sure where that bridleway goes when it goes beyond the site. So perhaps you could just clarify that. And my question then is with regard to the surface treatment that the bridleway will eventually end up with. You've mentioned that there won't be loose chippings for the first 50 metres. What will the bridleway end up with looking like at the end of all of this, when the construction work is done, and where does it go? That's my first question.
Shall we get the answer to that first then, yes, Sherry, please, and then move on to the others? Okay, yes. Peter, are you happy to come back on that?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the bridleway continues on to Wimford Heath. The materials proposed, I'm trying to find the reference in my report and I can't see it now. It wasn't to be tarmacked, it would be a kind of a natural material to be used, but it will be the first 50 metres that may have to have a hard surface in order to protect the highway being harmed. And I'm just trying to find it in the report, and as is often the way, I can't see it at present. But it would not be tarmacked all the way through. Sorry, bear with me, I'm just seeing if I can see where it is. A suitable aggregate, sorry, I knew I had it somewhere in the report and I was just scanning for it. So it would be an aggregate that would be used, so we wouldn't be talking about tarmacking the whole bridleway. And it should be pointed out as well that that would only, if I go back through the plans for a second. Where's my cursor? There we are. So here we are. Actually, there might be a better one back here.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we'll use this one. So this doesn't show the bridleway going on, but it does continue on from there. And it should be noted that actually the only access point will be in here by the substation, and then the access will be internal to the site itself. So we're actually only talking about any work to this part of the bridleway taking place. Apologies, I don't know if any of the other plans will show that in any better detail. Yeah, you can see, so this does actually, you can see the bridleway then continues on up that way onto Wimford Heath before curving round.
Right.
So we're not talking about the entirety of the bridleway being surfaced, and an aggregate will be used. But the first, as I said, the first 50 metres, we will need details of exactly what is to be used to ensure that it doesn't cause an issue from a highway safety point of view.
Yes, that's helpful, thank you. And just if we could just make sure that it's not just highway safety, it's also hoofs. So we need to make sure that whatever we put there is doesn't cause an issue for horses' stones in their hooves, because some aggregates are better than others for bridleways. If I could, anyway, you've clearly thought about it. If I can just flag that up, that would be fine. Thank you.
Yeah, can I? Do you mind if I respond, Chair? Is that?
No.
No, and you respond. I mean, I know with these bridleways, Peter, actually just butting in there. I mean, they are under regular inspection by our countryside teams anyway, and we'll pick up with the responsible, maintenance people as we go forward. But it's a fair.
We also have a planning condition for all the landscaping, and that includes that part of the bridleway is included within the site outline. So that will be controlled by planning condition as well, so that we make sure that the material we end up with is suitable. So we do have control over that.
That's very satisfactory. Thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, if I may, my next question concerns the security fence. Now, you've talked about the wildlife corridor outside of the security fence, which is excellent. Can I just ask if anybody's thought about little spaces underneath, little gaps in the fence at the bottom for small mammals to get in and out, because that's another thing that's essential, because obviously rabbits will be in there, but they need to be able to get in and out, not just in one place. So can we just confirm that that's been thought of?
Yeah, good question. Peter?
Yeah, thank you. There is a biodiversity mitigation plan which has been approved by our natural environment team, and so consideration will have been given to all of those elements. I can go through the detail and try and find it for you if it would be helpful, but I can confirm that we've got a full mitigation plan in place, which the natural environment team, who obviously specialise in ensuring all these matters are adequately dealt with, are satisfied with what's being put forward here.
That's good enough for me. Thank you very much. Just thinking of the rabbits, because we saw them, that there were a lot of them up there.
Indeed, there was.
Yes,
one very busy one, or lots of others. Yes.
Or lots of others. I think it's rabbits, so I think we can assume there's lots. My third question, then, Mr. Chairman, if you will bear with me.
Yes, please.
Is slightly less precise. You've talked about you've told us that this will generate 40 megawatts of electricity. I have to say that this is not my field of expertise, so I don't know whether that's, I mean, it sounds like a lot, but I don't know if it's a lot or a little. Now, we know that there is an issue across much of Dorset of a shortage of power coming from the national grid. So could you give me give us a view about how significant an impact this power generation, this 40 megawatts, would be on the Dorset-wide issue we have? Is it enough to make a difference? I mean, it's enough. It's an amount of electricity, of course it is, but is it enough electricity to make a difference to the issue that we have Dorset-wide with the shortage of power from the grid? I just want to get an idea of the scale of the benefit we might be getting from this. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So 40 megawatts would generate electricity for approximately 14,000 homes. So that's the kind of scale that we're looking at. So a significant contribution to energy generation in the area.
Okay, thank you. I guess that's probably a yes then, that it would be sufficient electricity to make a difference beyond just locally, that it would make a difference it would address in part the issue that we have Dorset wide with the grid. I think I'm taking that from that answer.
Yeah, it feeds into the national grid, Sherry, and that's it. We get our share of it as it's proportioned out, and as the need is there, it all adds into the pot. I think that's what is coming out of this. Yes, it's not specifically aimed at areas within Winfrith, Newborough, or that
No,
part of the world. It
exactly.
just goes into the national scheme of things.
Yes, and the houses are in any case hypothetical, so it's a bit like saying,
Yeah.
you know, this gauge, we have something the size of Wales, and you.
But that's how we can gauge it. That's how we can gauge the output.
That's very helpful. Thank you very much. No more questions.
Thank you very much, Sherry. Thank you. Right, next is David Took.
Thank you, Chair. I'm interested in what work will be done to the barrows to take them off the at-risk register, and specifically Bronze Age barrows are frequently a focal point for later burials. For example, Barrow Clump on Salisbury Plain, which has a rather large Anglo-Saxon burial site around the base of the barrow. Will any work on the barrows enable an investigation into any such later burials, so geophys surveys or whatever? Is this an opportunity to just add to our knowledge?
I don't know whether Peter would have that information. That is a good point. But
sorry.
Yeah, I don't know whether you would have that information, Peter, but because Historic England have already had the debate about this, and they have obviously discussed what needs to be done and what should be done. However, do you have any response you can give the councillor?
No, I mean, excuse me. The response would be Historic England have looked at this and considered that the sum of money being proposed would be sufficient to provide that mitigation. Exactly what that looks like would be something for the council in consultation with Historic England to work out. And from the applicant's point of view, the requirement for them is to provide the financial contribution, which Historic England consider to be sufficient, and then exactly how that's best used to bring those barriers off the Heritage at Risk Register is a conversation that would take place with the experts effectively.
Okay, David, I think your question's very valid, and it's a very important point, because I mean these barrows are very valuable. There are so many of them within Dorset anyway, but I think that's a fair comment that it will be something that's an ongoing development between the experts, and they will have the finances there to support them.
Yeah, thank you. I hope it was something that will figure in their deliberations, because it is an opportunity, and it is quite common for these barrows to actually host, for want of a better word, later burials. But thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Next is Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, can I congratulate Mr. Walters on his presentation, a really excellent presentation, which has succeeded in wiping out several of my questions because it was so good. But I got two questions I'd like to ask. First one is a clarification that on page 9, at 7.0, relevant planning histories, it makes mention of a wildlife pond that had approval to be created. If so, I just wanted to know whether there's an assurance that that won't be filled in if it is there. I do see that the applicant has worked very hard to try and minimise any flooding impact in future on the site, and has worked with Dorset Council's lead flood authority on that, according to the report. But is there a wildlife pond there, and does it still stay in situ? That's the first thing.
That's page 9, item 7, isn't it, under the relevant planning history that you're referring to? Yeah,
it is. Yeah,
that's right. The honest answer is I'm not sure if it was implemented. Again, I would refer back to the mitigation plan that's been submitted that the Natural Environment team have supported, and we wouldn't seek to lose any existing habitat unless it's being suitably replaced. So it's not a full answer. I apologise, but I don't want to mislead you. I can't say with certainty whether it was implemented, but if it was, if that's to be lost, then that would need to have been replaced, or else the Natural Environment team wouldn't have agreed to it. And if it was never implemented, then obviously it's not an issue. So I apologise.
No,
it's
no
not a
apology
full
needed.
answer.
No apology needed, Chairman. Through you, Mr. Walters. That's a good answer. If it is there, then obviously it's going to be mitigation to make sure that a like for like is given. So I'm happy with that. And it may well be outside of the site area anyway, Chairman. I understand that. My next one was I think it's slide 27 probably refers to it. The fence surrounding the substation. Now, they build these up and down the country, and it's probably a bit of a silly question, but just because this is such a rural site, whether the fencing that's being put around the substation, we know we've had these tragic accidents in the past, that this is like a vandal-proof fencing that is non-climbable. I suspect the answer is yes to both of those, but just to ask the question, just for clarification on that, to prevent anyone from actually gaining access into the site.
I would expect that it would be. I'm not sure if we've got those details, but there would be a duty on the developer to take appropriate steps to make sure that it isn't. And in terms of, from a planning perspective, it wouldn't necessarily change the elevations themselves, because it tends to be anti-climb paint and what have you that's used. So, excuse me, sorry. So there is separate legislation that would require, from a health and safety perspective, to ensure that that is the case.
So, sorry, through you, Chairman. So that would be separate legislation for that to ensure that would happen without us needing to put that in as a condition.
Would it come out of the terms of condition if we needed, or an informative note? If it could be incorporated. I mean, a condition I wouldn't have thought would have been too arduous, just to dot the I's and cross the T's, maybe.
I mean, again, we've got a hard landscaping condition. We could add to that details of fencing to be provided if members would seek to have further clarification on that.
Well, I mean, I take the councillor's point here in a way, because I think we all agree it's a very remote location. Actually, it's pretty wild up there, and I think you might think, well, it is out of the way, but that could be one of the reasons why it's more important to secure it as far as possible. So I think that's a very valid point, and maybe we could put that in as that's a reasonable condition if it's up for approval. That is, if it's. I think you're happy with that, Shane?
I am. Yes, yeah. Thank you.
Okay,
thank you, Mr. Walters. Thank you.
That's your questions, is it?
It is, yes. Thank you.
Okay, fine.
Sorry, if I could just jump in there, Chair.
Yes, Mike, yeah.
I don't particularly see that as being an issue or a problem for us to put on, because there would be legislation requiring that level of security, depending, as anything has to go through health and safety proposals. So I'm sure the applicant would be more than happy to be able to confirm that they're meeting all the necessary safety requirements in order to satisfy the committee that is being done. So I wouldn't have thought there's any difficulty with that.
Oh, well, that's reassuring. So yeah, thank you very much for that. I'm sure Councillor Bartlett will be happy with these responses for that.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, Mike. Next on the list is Councillor Alex Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one. As regards security in the way, that I do know that people fly kites and sometimes drones off the neighbouring Tadnol, which is sort of a higher lump the other side of the road from where we were standing. And what happened, is there likely to be a no-fly zone over this? Because I can imagine, you don't need too many drones falling into these things before there's a bit of a local issue about how to get them back, or whether they're shredded or whatever. It's just something that's coming up more and more, kids flying drones about, and these sort of open areas are quite fun for that. So that was one. Have we got any sort of procedure? The other one is in terms of sort of not mitigation, your 106 agreement. I see in the comments that although the bridle path that goes past, that some of the horse riders are happy with that, the fact it's going to be improved. But will there be any money coming in at all to, say, help upgrade the bridle path that is opposite on the 352, so as to make it a circular route rather than to stop horses riding along the side of the main road? Not horses riding, but horse riders going along the verge. Will there be anything coming back to help improve other local bridleways? in terms of, I don't know, cash payout or a sort of maintenance agreement.
Okay, well, it just shows you what a versatile committee we are. Drones to bridleways. There you go. 2 questions.
If I can address the bridleway one first, there isn't any direct mitigation proposed at this point because the development wouldn't impact on the bridleway to the south of the A352, so it wouldn't necessarily be reasonable to require that. But what there is proposed is this landscape enhancement fund, and that will be managed by the AONB management team, and there'll be the opportunity for various stakeholders to bid for some of that fund to carry out local improvements, and it has to be local as well. So priority will be given to those improvements in the area which enhance the landscape, particularly the AONB, and enhance its enjoyment. So there's the potential for someone to submit a bid for some money to improve that bridleway if they can make the case that that would be an enhancement to the AONB, which they may be able to do. So it isn't proposed directly. There is the potential for that if it was to be brought forward. As for the no-fly zone and the drones, I'm not sure if that's something that sits within the planning process and whether that's something that we can realistically do. I don't know if Mike wants to jump in on this one. I'm not 100% sure whether that's something we're able to.
I think Mike. Yes. Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, through you. It's something that has not been flagged up to us as being a particular issue, or that something I can honestly say we would have the ability to control through condition, because it's beyond the implications of the application itself. If there is an issue with that, then I think it would be for other parties to deal with that through other control mechanisms, but not something that I think we would be in a position to consider as material to this planning application that's before you today.
I think that's a fair answer. Thank you for that. Yes, non-material issue, but I mean it's a fair comment to raise, Alex. So thank you for that. Something maybe to consider going forward with these sort of things, but at the moment it's not relevant. Okay, Belinda Rideout.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. I have a comment, if that's okay. First of all, I'd like to say, Peter, a great presentation. That was so informative, really good, with the photographs. Obviously, I went to see the site with everyone else, and I can see with the lie of the land, it's quite flat and it's a very well screened site. And in a way, it lends itself to this sort of development. I can also see, though, there will be an impact on the landscape and heritage assets. But I think I agree with the officer, it will be less than substantial impact. In the report, I think the landscape officer mentions the word exemplar, an exemplar scheme, as long as all the conditions are met. And I tend to agree with this. I think it's really good. It ticks all the required boxes for me. The mitigation is robust to reduce any harm. And the proposal gives something back. It's giving something back to the AONB over 40 years. It's going to rescue the Tumalai, which is great. And of course, the biodiversity, which we spoke about, and we've all heard about this morning. And I particularly like the sheep grazing underneath the panels, and I think that's really good double use of land. So all in all, I agree with the officer's recommendation. I'd be very happy to agree with a minded approval of the application. Thank you.
Is that a firm proposal?
It is, Chairman.
Is there a seconder for that, please?
Yes, Chair. Councillor Bolwell, I was going to make a proposal, but I see I've been beaten to the punch on that one.
Yes, I saw your note there, Councillor Bolwell. Yes, I did see that, but you're happy to second. Well, I've got Councillor Shane Bartlett on the list as well. Shane, did you have another question, or was it for discussion?
Thank you, Chairman. I did have another question. Yeah.
Well, we've got the proposal on the table. We've got a seconder, but ask away, please, because
yeah.
I've got a couple of questions as well, and I think I'm allowed to ask a couple of questions. But
yeah, I think the proposal coming a bit quick, and I think that my view on it is a very good application. But I do have another question, which is, and I lost my place in the report slightly, but on page 23 at 15.26. is to operate for a 40-year period before being decommissioned. Now, obviously, it may well be that there would be another application coming in at a later date to extend that period at sometime in the future when we're all not here, probably. And that's not for today, obviously, because we deal with the application that's in front of us. But I'm just thinking, is there a plan in place if the site was to be decommissioned in the 40-year period, as is laid out in the report? Is that funded? I mean, what sort of assurances have been put in place to ensure that whichever company is operating at that time will have the wherewithal to actually decommission that site and return it back to as is?
Yes, in other words, if they decide to chop it after 20 years,
or even the full term, Chairman.
May I come in, Chair?
Yes, please, Peter.
Yeah. Thank you. So condition 3, proposed condition 3, requires that within 6 months of the cessation of electricity generation, or within 6 months of a permanent cessation of construction works, if it never gets that far, whichever is sooner, everything has to be removed, has to be dismantled, and the local planning authority have to be notified of that. And it must be decommissioned and restored in accordance with the scheme, the details of which must be approved by the council or the local planning authority excuse me, sorry, no later than 3 months following the cessation of the power production or the permanent cessation of the construction works. So we have a mechanism of control. It would be incumbent on whichever company is taking this on, if it gets taken over at some point in the future, to ensure that they can comply with that condition. But it would be our expectation that they would need to come to us and get a scheme of decommissioning approved and landscape restoration. So we do have some control over that, and that the mechanism in the condition is not only for the end of the 40 years, is if the use ceases before that 40 years, or even, as I said, during the construction process, if for any reason it couldn't continue. So we have put some controls in place.
Can I come back, Chairman, please?
Yes, okay.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for that, Ms. Walters. It was condition 3. I didn't write it in my notes that it was condition 3 where I was reading it. But what's not contained in there is the money being set aside to actually allow that decommission to take place should the company have gone bust or no company comes forward and we're left with a solar power farm on a site with no money from anyone to actually decommission it. That was my point. It was just, I wondered whether when these sort of applications come in, whether part of the process was that we have money set aside to decommission these facilities. I know that America had a major problem with this, with wind farms. I think there's 63% of wind farms in America, don't quote me on that because I'm doing this from memory and my memory is not very good, that lie decommissioned because there was never those arrangements put in place to make sure they could be decommissioned at the end of their working life.
In other words, is there a commuted sum?
Yeah,
that's what we're saying in a nutshell.
Yeah.
No, there isn't any commuted sum put aside as part of this. That condition is one that I've taken from another scheme that was approved in the Dorset Council area, so I've used that as the basis. It's if members were minded to do that, I suppose it would be a conversation with the applicant, I would think. But at this point, there's one.
Chairman, if I may, Chairman, I think perhaps obviously not for this one, but perhaps officers in future may wish to make that consideration on any future applications that come through.
Sorry,
I don't
Chairman,
know. Might have to defer to Mike on this one because it's a point which will crop up, I'm sure, going forward with this sort of application.
I think it's a difficult one.
With other things, we've seen it with more localised on normal planning issues as well. So
yeah, I think when it comes to decommissioning costs, it's a tricky one because actually we have a mechanism that we can use. So I suppose from a planning point of view, we've got to be satisfied that there is something in place that's reasonable and proportionate to the application that's before us, that can give us some assurances that there's a means of us ensuring that the scheme is decommissioned in an appropriate manner. and that's what we've put in place. Once you start talking about bonds or assurances or financial commitments up front, then it starts to have implications for viability of the scheme, because the money's got to be put up front right here and now, and we've got to have mechanisms for ensuring that that's in place. So it's not always a straightforward situation, and we start to tread into sort of slightly difficult terrains. We have in some situations where the complexities and the potential impact on the environment is of such great significance that actually it's really important to ensure that there is a mechanism to secure the decommissioning. And if we take Witch Farm as an example, that has a total decommissioning cost of somewhere in excess of something like £150 million. That is a huge liability if things go wrong. So we had an extremely complicated and complex process put in place to manage that risk and to ensure that there was the necessary assurances. But even then, it goes through a process that we have annual reassurances that come forward with links to the bank to do that. We're not really in the same sort of category of risk with something like a solar farm, I would suggest. And therefore, we've got to just balance that up with what we consider to be is a proportionate method of managing that risk and ensuring that there is some degree of commitment on the part of the applicant. So I think from that perspective, officers are advising that the condition itself is a satisfactory way of giving us some assurances that we have some degree of control over that decommissioning programme without putting the scheme potentially at viability risk, for example, if we have to secure upfront payments, because that introduces a whole new complexity of actually quantifying the cost of the decommissioning, doing all the works that are necessary, then getting all the necessary assurances that we would have to put in place and mechanisms set up as well to actually to achieve that. So I think from our point of view, the use of the condition seems to be proportionate and reasonable in this particular situation. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I think, Shane, I mean, we are where we are with this application, and I think Mike summed it up there quite well. Thank you.
Yeah,
but maybe it's something we could take forward and, you know, bring into discussions going forward as we get further applications. It might be something that's worth discussing with the applicants, because they, you know, you never know. They might say, well, they didn't ask us about giving us some money towards decommissioning. So it might be worth us considering that. But Shane?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm satisfied with the officer's answer. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, thank you, and thanks for your input there.
Thank you.
I don't have any more speakers or anyone on the list, but I have got a couple of questions. Peter, if I can direct them at you. I'm sure it's in the report, because I'm sure I read it somewhere in the report. But I just clarify, you talked a bit about the landscaping. The rather large complex there, the substation, etc. I know it's going to be screened to a degree and blah, blah, blah. And you've got a tree screen as well going across that section. What's going to be the camouflage for that and the accessories other than the actual panels? We know the panels look like a lake from a distance anyway, because we had that other one to use as from that vantage point to see what it would look like. But camouflage, and also the other thing about lighting. I don't think anything's been said about lighting and how that will be dealt with. So any comment on that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the colour that's been proposed to be painted is juniper green, and we have asked, I believe, yeah. So they've indicated that, but condition 8, sorry, hard landscaping, requires further detail so that we can, you know, we can control that. So it would be a case of providing us with the proposed colour and the RAL number, which is obviously an industry standard and something that we can then secure. So in terms of colour, that would be fine. In terms of lighting, I mean, on a day-to-day, there wouldn't be significant lighting on the site. There would need to be some within the substation if maintenance is being carried out. I haven't got details on what the lighting potentially would be. If it was something that was felt to be appropriate, then I'm sure we could revise condition 8 slightly to include details of lighting to be provided, because that condition is kind of covering the hard landscaping in of itself already. So that, I think that would be an addition that could be made if it was felt to be appropriate.
Well, yeah, because I couldn't find anything at all referring to that, and it's one of those things that we might just possibly overlook, and they need to have some sort of lighting, even if it works on a sensor basis, and it's got to conform then with the dark skies, etc., etc. If they do it, and you're right about the colouring. That is the juniper green colouring, which should blend quite well anyway with that environment. As now we've seen it in the real. Okay, that's my questions. Thanks for that. So no other speakers. So we have got a proposal on the table from Councillor Belinda Rideout that we accept the recommendation as set out, and that's been seconded by Councillor Dave Bolwell. And on that basis, I'm going to move to the minded to vote. And when I call your name, if you'd be kind enough to state, first of all, that you obviously were at the site visit, that you've seen the presentation and you've been present throughout the meeting before you put your minded to decision. That would be helpful, please, members, if you would. Right, Vice Chairman, Councillor John Worth.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I attended the site visit, which I found very informative. I've been here throughout, and I'm minded to approve this application.
Just holding on there, David Took has put up there a slight addition to the conditions.
So,
right, David, what's the condition you're talking about, please?
When we were looking at it earlier, there was a proposal on just before the proposal was made. I thought there was a suggestion that we could amend one of the conditions slightly. I can't remember which one, but is that included in the proposal?
Yes, that's a good point, Chair. Sorry, Chairman. I think that was the one to do with the fencing and security safety issues, I believe.
Yes, indeed it was. Yes, and I think that was accepted as being, at the time, as being acceptable to this, if I recall.
Chairman, it's Phil Crowther. My recollection, and I stand to be corrected, was that was part of the debate. Proposal was made, I think, by Councillor Rideout, and I don't recall whether she said formally that amended condition formed part of the proposal. So I think we need to clarify with Councillor Rideout whether her proposal included that amended condition or not, and then take the vote accordingly.
Yeah, thank you for clarifying that, Phil Crowther. That's useful. So the proposer, Councillor Rideout, you've heard that, and you heard the discussion about the changes to the fences as a condition. You happy with that?
I'm happy with that, and also for the lighting that you mentioned earlier.
Yeah, well, there's going to be no lighting. I've been advised since.
Okay,
no
right, thank you.
And the seconder, Councillor Bolwell, are you happy with that?
Yes, perfectly happy with that, Chair.
Fine, we've got there then. So I'm going to run through the roll call again, if you don't mind. So we go back to Councillor John Worth, Vice Chairman, please.
Right, okay. Yeah, I attended the site meetings, as I say, which found very useful to bring everything into context. I've listened to the debate, and I'm happy to give the minded to decision to approve this application.
Okay, thanks. Councillor Shane Bartlett.
Thank you, Chairman. I attended the site visit. I've listened to all of the officers' presentation. I've taken part in the debate, and I am minded to approve the application subject to the change in the conditions as well. Thank you.
Cool. Councillor Dave Bolwell.
Yes, Chair. I attended the site visit. I've heard the presentation. I've taken part in the debate, and obviously, being a seconder, I'm minded to approve the application.
Thank you. Councillor Alex Brenton.
Thank you, Chair. I've been present through the discussion this morning. I did go to the site visit. I am interested in and in favour of this proposal, so I vote in favour of this proposal.
Thank you. Kelvin Clayton's apologies. Councillor Jean Dunseith.
Thank you, Chairman. I attended the site visit. I've heard and listened to the presentation. I've listened to the debate, and I am minded to approve.
Thank you. Councillor Mike Dyer has not taken part. Councillor Sherry Jesperson.
Thank you, Chairman. I attended the site visit. I have listened to the debate, listened to the presentation, taken part in the debate, and I'm minded to support this recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mary Penfold.
Thank you, Chairman. I attended the site visit. I've been present throughout the discussion and listened to the debate, and I'm minded to approve the application.
Thank you. Councillor Belinda Rideout.
Thank you, Chairman. I was present at the site visit. I've been present throughout the committee and the presentation, and I'm minded to approve. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor David Took.
I was on the site visit. I was present throughout this presentation and listened very carefully to the debate, took part in it, and I'm minded to approve.
Okay, thank you very much. Looking at my figures here, Elaine, looking at my figures, I make that unanimous.
Yes, I agree.
Agree.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's the minded to decision. So to move to the officer, in this case Mike Garrity, who will give us his decision on this one. Thank you. Over to you, Mike.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I can confirm I too have visited the site along with the members on the committee site visit. I've listened to the officer's presentation and the debate that followed, and I can confirm that the decision will be taken in accordance with the committee's minded to recommendation. Thank you.
Fine, thank you very much. Good. Right, well, thank you very much, members. That was a good discussion on that one. Well worth going out and getting blown about in the wind as well on Monday morning. So thank you very much for that. Item 5, urgent items. No urgent items of business, I'm pleased to say. And item 6, exempt business. And again, there is no exempt business. So on that note, just before I close the meeting, can I just first of all thank all involved in setting this one up. Again, the logistics of doing the site visit with all the other restrictions that we've got around us in whatever form at the moment. So well done. That was very, very good and very worthwhile. Very good report, Peter. Thank you. And wish everybody a very, very happy Christmas and a peaceful and prosperous new year. And can I also, Mike Garrity, through you, thank all your team for what they have done to help my committee through this year particularly, which has not been easy for anybody. We appreciate, I'm sure that members will support me on this, everything that your team have done to help us. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll be sure to pass that on to the team. So thank you very much. Your thoughts are much appreciated.
Okay. So there's nothing else to say now other than at 11:31. Thank you all for your attendance, and the meeting is closed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you.
Thank you.